Good morning, PotCoins. Today is Sunday, 22 June 2014. We are currently on block 315364 of the Pot chain. This week, I did an awesome interview with Stefan Macaskill, and it turned out so good that I didn't want to edit anything out of it. It's all solid gold. So, since it was kind of long, I'm condensing the rest of the segments this week. Here's the abridged version of stuff going on this week. PotFunder goes live. What a great crowdfunding platform. It's so great that I'll be sure to talk more about it next week too. Till then, check it out for yourself at potfunder.com. Also, PotCoin's total market cap has been steady over 1 million. The community is awesome. Acceptance is on the rise along with the price. And similar stories every week. More good news to come. Pot's great. It's still illegal in most places, but more places are legalizing medical and recreational. And people still keep getting screwed over in places where it's not legal yet. Similar stories every week. Some people like cryptocurrencies and some don't. The ones that like them are hoping for a better future with decentralization and deflationary money, and they generally don't like governments and banks. The people that don't like cryptocurrencies are mostly governments and banks that stand to lose their power to leech off of the productive. More Bitcoin ATMs pop up all over the world each week. Some countries say that cryptos are okay, and other countries are banning them. Similar stories every week. This is the top story this week. I've mentioned AmagiMetals a few weeks ago when they started accepting PotCoin for precious metals. I recently met the owner and CEO at the Denver monthly Bitcoin meetup. He was such an interesting character that I asked if he would do an interview, and he agreed to spare a bit of his valuable time. I'm here with Stephen Macaskill of AmagiMetals, and we're going to be doing an interview.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the interview.
So, first question, what got you into the precious metals market?
Yeah, so I was really interested in sound money and financial responsibility, and my interest in those things led me to first start a clothing line that promoted individual liberty, and my interest in individual liberty and promoting it in popular culture allowed us to make a lot of money from that company. But I realized that my passion was more for shiny objects such as gold, or I like to say sound money and financial responsibility. So pushing that and going to college for financial economics, I purchased the precious metals company and shut down the clothing line and have been running AmagiMetals ever since.
Awesome. So I know that you were a very early adopter of the Bitcoin. When did you get into that, and can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I got into Bitcoin we started accepting Bitcoin in 2012. I first heard about it probably late 2010 or early 2011. And my company made gold rounds for someone on the Bitcoin forums to sell these gold Bitcoin rounds for Bitcoins. And that was our first confrontation with Bitcoin, but we didn't really do too much research or look into it until a friend of mine from college called me one day and said, hey, you should really start looking into Bitcoin and look into accepting it. It's this great currency that isn't controlled by any politicians. It has a finite supply. And so, and was telling me all the other benefits about it. And so I did research and fell in love with the idea and the innovation behind it, and so we started accepting it in late 2012, and it's been quite a success for us.
So how much was a Bitcoin worth at the time you started accepting them?
Yeah, it was about $13. A lot less than it is today.
A lot less. All right, and recently you've started accepting PotCoins.
Yes, we started accepting it, I believe, 2 months ago, roughly, maybe a month ago, and yeah, it's was just an on switch pretty much for us to be able to accept PotCoin and other cryptocurrencies.
So why was PotCoin one of the cryptocurrencies that you decided to accept?
Well, we're here in Colorado, and I'm not sure if you've heard on the radio, but there are all these advertisements for PotCoin explaining how cryptocurrency can benefit dispensaries because they can't get federal bank accounts, or they can't get bank accounts because of the federal government. And so it just made sense to, since we're part of it here in Colorado, to start accepting it. I will say that since we started accepting it, we haven't actually received a PotCoin purchase. Or if we have, it hasn't been that much. So yeah, it's something that we still would like to advertise and push out, and I think that it could definitely help the dispensaries monetize their sales.
Sure. I mean, one of the reasons that I started to believe so strongly in PotCoin is it was the first cryptocurrency to attempt to be backed by a real-world commodity.
Yeah, I think that I think that there's a lot to be said for niche markets and having cryptocurrencies backed by something, by an industry, by a commodity, by someone's talent, by, it could be anything. For Bitcoin, it's a lot of things surrounding the blockchain and the technology behind it.
Right. So you mentioned that dispensaries are obviously having problems with banks, but you've had problems with banks too. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we've had 2 bank accounts shut down now. The first one, Bank of the Worst, also known as Bank of the West. The second one is First Bank, a Colorado bank, and both of them were, I guess, very conservative and very anti-Bitcoin. And when we had our account shut down with Bank of the West, during that time, a lot of banks were anti-Bitcoin, but we've seen that that's starting to change. This was about a year ago. Now, our First Bank account was shut down in the last few weeks, and it's just because they're a smaller bank, they're very conservative, and they're very wary of new technologies such as Bitcoin.
Well, especially technology that may put them out of business.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. When I went there, they said they had just started receiving memos about the cryptocurrency, and a banker I spoke to told me that it was a dangerous currency because it was unregulated. It protects people's financial privacy, and she said that it didn't seem like a legitimate currency. And so I had to pose the question, and you think the dollar is? Is the dollar a legitimate currency? I can't see it being that.
Right, so I mean, Bitcoins are obviously dangerous because they're unregulated, but a safe currency is one that's guaranteed to lose value over time. That's their idea of safe, right?
Yeah, and it's absurd, but when you look at the reality of it, Bitcoin requires no force for people to accept it. It's derived value completely on a voluntary basis, and that's the beautiful thing about it. Whereas currencies like the dollar are backed by violence, basically a coercive monopoly. If businesses don't accept the dollar, then you can essentially go to jail or get in trouble or have to pay fines or something like that, because they say that legal tender, the dollar, is for all debts, public and private. And so that means basically people are required to take it.
Right, so cryptocurrencies are the only type that you're not forced to use.
Yeah, I mean, same with gold and silver.
Right,
people
like it's a
are
voluntary choice.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of voluntary choice, I understand that you're pretty into agorism and anarchy.
Yes, I would say that I would consider myself an anarchist.
Okay, so what brought that about?
Um, hmm.
I mean, was it just you thought about it, or you had negative experiences with the government, or because it logically makes sense, or like where did it come from?
Yeah, I would say it's a mix of all three.
Okay.
My dad founded the Free Market Foundation in South Africa in the 70s. He wrote a book called In Search of Liberty. In the book, he quoted and talks about Murray Rothbard. And so my dad has an economics background and has been involved in individual liberty since the 70s. So being brought up by an anarchist, it wasn't that difficult. They didn't really teach me to be an anarchist. They taught me to think rationally. And then I also had an encounter with the state. When I was in 5th grade, I started my own business. And what I would do was go to Sam's Club, buy a big bag of warheads, come home, go to school and sell them for 10 to 25 cents each. Bring in anywhere between 20 to 60 bucks a day, which isn't that much, but you know, for a 5th grader, that becomes a lot of money.
Oh yeah, that is a lot of money in 5th grade.
Yeah.
And you know, even 25 cents is a huge markup.
Yeah.
So you were obviously pretty good at business from an early age.
Yeah, so that was my first entrepreneurial venture, and it made me interested in school. I was really excited about packing my backpack with all the candy, ready to go to school, to sell to the kids, to count how much money I made when I get home, to figure out how much demand is needed, so how much I needed to purchase, you know, what kind of colors people are interested in to, you know, make more money by offering those products to those customers. And so, yeah, I had a really good gig going. And then one day, sitting in class, a teacher asked, "Hey, we heard that someone was selling food in the cafeteria." It wasn't even me who was doing that. So, but of course everyone knew I was the guy selling this amazing candy, so they all pointed at me. And so the teacher took me outside with an administrator and another teacher, and they talked to me as if I had done something wrong or illegal or bad. They said, "I can't sell any more candy again. If I do, I have to get permission from the principal. I have to can't make a profit, so all the money I make will have to get donated to a nonprofit. And if I did it again, I would be instantly suspended or expelled." And so that was my first encounter with the state. And going home, I remember my parents just being furious with the school, not at me. I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
You know, they're preventing me from growing my skills, essentially. So they hurt my potential for learning, and they took away my business and essentially shut everything down. It was quite ridiculous.
So when you were going to school, you were actually getting an education, learning things like business and marketing,
Yeah.
supply and demand, inventory, markup.
Exactly.
Like you were learning real marketable skills, which led you to be where you are today, and that's what you did wrong.
Yeah, so...
like that's what the school thought was wrong, is that you weren't being forced what to think, you were learning how to think yourself, which, you know, is a pretty dangerous thing for a school.
Yeah, and so that encounter with the state was, I guess, when I started to become an anarchist. So, and then as I grew older, I, of course, put it together. I started reading about Austrian economics, and then about philosophy, so that I have an understanding from a philosophical point of view and from an economic perspective.
Wow, that's a really interesting story. I mean, that's a story that I wish more people had.
Yeah.
Because most of us, at least when I went to school, we were forced into submission, and if you ever did even attempt to think for yourself, you were doing something wrong.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, but I'm so happy that we're living in today, because that's changing. It's changing every day. We're seeing more decentralization, more people homeschooling their children, more people who are asking questions and encouraging others to ask questions.
Yeah, asking questions is a really big one. I remember getting kicked out of Catholic school for asking questions.
Wow.
Because they don't like questions. They like to tell you answers that they just made up, and then they don't like to be asked to verify, or, how do you know that? Well, because I said so.
Absolutely.
Is usually the answer that I got, and that did not work out for me anyway.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, 20 years ago, my friend actually made this analogy last night. 20 years ago, you could go into a church, and pretty much any church would look down or talk about homosexuality and how terrible it is. But today, the religious individuals who are doing that are an outlier rather than every single church in America. So we're seeing a huge shift in our thought processes across the country, and people are a lot more open-minded. They're a lot more open to asking questions, and we have things to think like the internet for that.
So when you mentioned that right now is a pretty amazing time to be alive, I definitely have to agree with that. I've thought about it in the past before, like, I bet it would be cool to live in, the 60s or 70s or whatever. Right now, I really think that this is the time to be alive. Like, this is one of the most exciting times in human history. And in 40, 50 years from now, people will be like, man, I wish I was around in the teens. How do you feel about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that if you look at the last 200 years and what humanity has accomplished, we have just hit the start of those accomplishments. I think that the next 50 years will be so changing, so different, that it'll basically be the last 200 years times 1,000 in terms of innovation, technology, and wealth production around the world.
Yeah, I definitely see a lot of that too, especially what you mentioned with wealth production. That's what makes me believe we're going to really get away from governments that are leeching off of the productive, providing no worthwhile service, and people will just let that go. Just stop believing in it.
Oh yeah, and we're seeing a shift in mindset. A lot of individuals used to think that the global economy is a zero-sum game. So if I make wealth, then I'm taking wealth away from you. Or if I'm accumulating wealth, then I'm taking it away from you. But we've seen that that's not true. The entire world is growing wealthier. There are homeless people with cell phones. There are millions of people in China and India that are being lifted above the poverty line as they move away from their centrally planned economies and governments to a decentralized, anarchic state.
All right. So let's see. Would you like to talk any more about your actual business and your company?
Yeah. So we sell gold and silver and platinum, and we sell it to investors, individuals, and institutions around the world. We've been accepting Bitcoin since 2012. We just launched our new website today, actually, AmagiMetals.com. And the new website has all kinds of new features like market alerts. So for commodities and Bitcoin, which I guess one can consider a commodity. So if Bitcoin goes above, well, it already has gone above $600, but if it goes above $1,000, you just put in, okay, I want to be alerted, and you can receive a text message or an email once it passes $1,000.
That's a really awesome feature to have for your site.
Yeah.
And so you have the same, if gold reaches 1,500 an ounce, you would get a text message.
Exactly. Yeah. Or an email.
Or an email, sure. Or both. Why not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you were mentioning Bitcoin, is and is not a commodity. I think that's a thing that a lot of people are having a hard time with, because they're saying, is it a currency or is it a commodity when it has properties of both? I personally think that, well, you can't fit a round peg into a square hole. It's a new thing that we haven't had before. Mm-hmm. So all these old rules just aren't going to apply to it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that a currency would have to be a commodity, and that Bitcoin can certainly be both.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely shows properties of both, mm-hmm. and can be used as both.
Yeah, and of course, as you said, we're still kind of in a new phase, a new, I still consider it an experiment. It's an amazing experiment, and it's showing that it has those properties, but I don't think we're there yet to say that it is a currency.
Oh, right. I mean, anyone who knows is aware that it's still in beta.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it totally is an experiment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So.
All right. Do you have any shout-outs? Would you like to, say hi to anybody watching this, maybe?
Any shout-outs? Hey, Santa. Let's see here. Well, I'd like to, I suppose, do a shout-out to Janet Yellen. You're doing a terrible job at your job. I don't know if people heard her latest report saying that they're going to continue their tapering off their quantitative easing, but they want to plan on keeping interest rates low so that the economy can improve itself. And of course, that's one of the main reasons why gold shot up $30 today, is because of that announcement. So keep failing, Janet. The more you continue to do these, continue these terrible policies and legislating and regulating, the more you're pricing yourselves out of the market, making it easier for businesses and individuals to find an alternative, which is cryptocurrency.
That has got to be the greatest shout out I've ever heard. Hey, failures, keep failing. We're only going to benefit. That was really amazing.
Thank you.
So thanks for your time, and I guess that's it.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I hope y'all enjoyed that as much as I did. Mind-blowing stuff. Check out the new site for AmagiMetals at AmagiMetals.com, and that's all for this edition of Mad PotCoins. Smoke 'em if you got 'em. Yeah, like I haven't really thought about this. I figured we would just wing it.
Yeah.